So some people might not realize that OCD counts as a disability that is protected under special education laws. And so if you have documentation from a provider saying that your child has OCD or anxiety disorder more generally, even depression, these other not very visible disabilities, they still are eligible for services from the school, or they can be. So the school will go through their own evaluation process, but oftentimes good advocacy from parents and including documentation from health providers, from medical doctors, all of that is really helpful in the school getting on board to really put these accommodations into writing. And there's kind of two different ways that they can put these accommodations into writing. One is an individualized education plan, and one is a 504 plan. They fall under different federal laws, which the differences aren't extremely important. What is good to know is that the individualized education plan has the most protections for your student. And so the school will evaluate for the IEP, and if your student meets eligibility, then you get to go to meetings. Parents are invited to these meetings. Professionals, so psychologists, other therapists can come to these meetings. They can also write letters with their suggestions for what should go into an individualized education plan. And all of that advocacy really helps the school decide what is going to be most helpful. And so it is up to the school to decide what's going to be helpful based on the resources that they have. But some of those things can include time with the social worker. It can include extra time on tests. It can include more time out of the classroom, notes, if taking notes is really difficult. Teachers can provide their notes, modified homework assignments, modified classroom assignments, because it's really not fair that a child would have to have a lower grade or risk failing a course because of something that their anxiety makes hard for them. And so this is all about just making it a level playing field and making it fair. And so if you have the ability to advocate for an individualized education plan, that one does afford the most protections. Another option, which is a little less heavy on paperwork and is sometimes another preferred option, is the 504 plan, which will allow these accommodations but won't amend curriculum. So if a student is missing a bunch of classes and things like that, the IEP might be more appropriate. If you just need more testing time, you need a little bit of classroom notes and just some of those more simple modifications, then the 504 can be most helpful. So a common tip for advocacy for parents is to really try to get everything in writing. So when you are requesting an evaluation for your student, make sure to do that in writing so you have a date that you can kind of verify later, because there's a certain number of days that the school has to respond. Also, getting things in writing from your providers is very helpful. A lot of times the people at the table at the IEP meetings are trying to be most helpful, but OCD is less common than things like ADHD, which they deal with every day. So having people be able to kind of weigh in and say what they think would be helpful, these professionals in the field, is extremely valuable. Parents can bring whoever they like to these meetings. If you're going to bring a professional to a meeting, it's best if you tell the school before you do that. But therapists are welcome to come to the meeting or to call in. And sometimes therapists can't physically get to the school, which is understandable, so those letters are also very helpful. So the other tip is that the school is used to doing these evaluations on a yearly basis. The testing has to be renewed every 3 years in an IEP, and the IEP document itself has to be reviewed every year. But for the treatment of anxiety disorders, it's probably going to be more helpful to review things more frequently. So accommodations can be updated as the student makes changes, and so that we're not using the same accommodations, it will be important to have these meetings. And so sometimes schools will say, we only have to have that meeting once a year, but if the parents ask, they are also required to have that meeting. So parents can ask for additional meetings aside from just the once a year meeting as well.